This is the Paltalk News Network.
The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users, on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. No retribution. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show, and I remind you to please go to our news site, paltalknewsnetwork.com. Check it early, check it often. Like you would vote in Chicago, early and often, for news that you may or may not see, hear, or read in the mainstream media. Before we get to our guest and our topic for this segment, what I'm about to tell you is no news to any of you who are on Paltalk, that over the past couple of days, a number of you have had difficulties logging on to the program. It was due to a denial of service attack. Our technical team literally worked around the clock 24 hours for 2 days straight to mitigate the problem. But let me tell you how proud I am of the Paltalk community and of this audience, because as soon as the attack was abated, the numbers on Paltalk immediately grew to the numbers that they were before the attack. This speaks not to Paltalk so much as to you and your loyalty. What great customers we have, the best in the world, and we thank you for that. You know, Iraqi voters refuse to be intimidated despite insurgent attacks designed to keep them from the polling places this past weekend. At least 36 people were killed. But in spite of that, 10 million voters showed up at 10,000 polling places to vote for over 6,000 candidates in Iraq's general election. That's a 62% turnout according to the BBC. Now, I'll compare that to the United States, where there's no threat that you're going to get shot and killed or blown up by a suicide bomber if you show up to vote. In the land of the free and the home of the brave, during the 2008 presidential election, the voter turnout was 56.8%. So under fear for their own lives, a greater percentage of the Iraqi voters showed up at the polls than those who showed up here in the United States. Significantly, in Anbar, which is a mainly Sunni province, there was a 61% voter turnout. Why is this significant? Because there were fears that Sunnis might not show up to vote because there were previous feelings of hostility. Now, the final results are not expected until the end of March. Preliminarily, it appears that Prime Minister Malikis' political coalition is holding, but it's not going to be by a wide margin. Is this an indication that the Iraqis have embraced democracy? And if so, is that a vindication of George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq? Joining us to put it all into perspective and to answer these and any other questions we may have about Iraq is Carl Canetta. He's co-director of the Project on Defense Alternatives. He's author of Should We Stay or Should We Go? The U.S. Debate on Exiting Iraq. He also authored Vicious Circle, The Dynamics of Occupation and Resistance in Iraq. Carl Canetta, welcome to News Talk Online on the Paltalk News Network.
Pleasure to be here.
To have you with us, sir. So the first question I guess I have to reiterate what I said during my introduction to you is this an indication with a greater voter turnout, 62% in Iraq, than we had during the last presidential election here in the United States, that the Iraqis have embraced democracy?
Well, the Iraqis certainly want to express their opinions, and there's more to democracy than voting, of course. And, the problem with this election is that it was preceded by the disqualification of 500 candidates, which is a practice that we see in the Iranian practice of what they call democracy. So there's still some severe limitations here. A lot of pressure put on some of the parties by the government through the military prior to the election. That type of thing would, in this country, be considered entirely unacceptable. So I don't think we're at a state where we can compare our democracy to theirs. Certainly the Iraqis and the different factions and the different ethnic groups feel strongly about the need to assert themselves. They are focusing now on asserting themselves through the ballot box. They've been frustrated in the past about the outcome of that, but there's still an enthusiasm, and there's much more of a focus on doing it through the ballot box than through the gun, which is certainly progress. But I don't know that they've crossed the threshold to something that in this country we would accept as a good democratic standard.
But the fact remains that ultimately a new government that purports to be representative of the people is going to be seated. And I'm wondering, Carl Canetta, what does that mean for the dynamics that exists between the Iraqis and the occupiers led by the United States of America?
Well, generally, the opinion, and it's pretty much across the board, with the exception of the Kurds, public opinion is to end the occupation. That's almost an article of faith. One of the problems that that people see in the current government there, the Maliki government, is that there was a promise when the Status of Forces agreement was signed that there would be a referendum, a popular referendum. This has been repeatedly delayed, supposedly for logistics reasons, though it could have easily been attached to the provincial elections or to this current one. So this is a question that the government there is not willing to put to the Iraqi people. But when you put it through polls to them, depending on the poll, you get a variety of responses. There is somewhere between a near majority to a majority who would like to see the Americans leave. And again, the exception really is in the Kurdish regions. In the Kurdish regions, we have a great deal of support, and in fact, they have invited American forces to simply move into their provinces if there is a national vote against us. We'll see too what happens when whoever wins this election. It looks like it will be Maliki, but he will not be able to form